All right, folks, thank you so much for your patience. It's great to have you all here. I believe we're recording and we're live and mics are hot and all that good stuff. So, with that, it's my absolute pleasure to be interviewing Amrit, founder and CEO of Hyperexponential, or HX, which is nice and catchy and easily easier. Has,
HX.
has it always been HX?
It has always been HX, yes.
Did you then build the longer name
No,
after
no,
that?
it started as hyperexponential, but I'm co-founder and CEO. My co-founder was like, yeah, we can't go hyperexponential, we'll do HX. So
I love
yeah,
that.
that's a whole podcast about the HX thing. So
Yeah. Well, it'll be fun as the next one to invite your
yeah,
co-founder on and have a bit of fun
indeed.
together. It's such an amazing thing for you to have started this company and for it to have grown. And when we were debating kind of which topic to discuss, it felt appropriate because we've been partnering together and we've got folks from our Accelerate program here from HX, our top talent investment, sort of coupling with and partnering with us at People Playbook. And what I've learned from you, Amrit, through your team is this investment you have in both culture and talent. And I'm curious, that's what we're going to spend time talking about. I'm curious, why is that so important to you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's always two dimensions to this. I think one is humans have things that are important to them, right? And those are just randomly distributed across the population. Sorry, I'm an actuary, so you're going to get some inevitably actuarial answers. And it's just one of those things that's inherently important to me, I think. Different people have different things that matter to them. And you'll see that, to the extent that the culture is the manifestations of the founders' personalities. I care a lot about it, kind of inherently. I'll also say that, HX, our business, it is a long cycle business, right? So, I always tell anyone who joins this company that if you work at Uber Eats and you ship a feature that lets you get a discount on a cheeseburger, you can launch that feature and you find out 15 minutes later how it's going, right? For a business like ours, it can take 2 years, right? From an idea to a feature, idea for a feature through to the customers feeling the value. And as a result, I think, you have to think a lot more about the like leading fundamentals. Like you can't rely on the dopamine hit, right? It's just our business just doesn't work that way. And, we've done a very good job of making that work very hard for us. We built a very durable business. The kind of trade-off we make for selling these very long cycle things is that the company has a very healthy cash balance and we're in very strong control of our destiny. But you have to be a certain person that thinks
Mm,
about the long term.
yeah.
And ultimately, if you think about the long term, really what matters is much more the fundamentals of the humans than anything else.
It's so interesting because I hadn't thought about it until you so clearly sort of laid out the two different examples of the longer cycle versus the shorter cycle. It sounds to me like actually culture would be incredibly important because with the short cycles, it's easy to quickly find out transactions and quick things that happen.
Mm.
Whereas actually over a longer cycle, culture, it feels like will be more critical.
Yeah, I always say, to everyone, people often talk about our culture and intensity and kind of focus and that side of things. And it's very simple to me, right? Like we have to measure ourselves by the inputs, right? Because the outputs are 2 years away, right? And there was this very famous quote a long time ago where someone congratulated Jeff Bezos on a wonderful quarter, right? And he's like, that quarter I made 2.5 years ago. Yeah. So he's like, it's great, but like the things I did, right? Like that happened 2.5 years ago. And I think, we see this in HX now, right? The company's still very dominant in our core space. It's not the stuff that we do right now. The stuff we do right now is focused on the next 10 years, right? You know,
Yeah, no,
uh,
I love that. I want to jump into your first point,
sure.
which I, I'm not even quite sure which direction this is going. But again, we're in London. The Peckham Carpark test. Tell us about what that means in the context of culture and talent.
Yeah, so HX actually has a very cliched early story. And that you hear about startups being founded in a garage. Google's very famous garage. It's now a monument, right? Maybe the Peckham Levels will one day be a monument. Who knows? We were, when we set the company up, we worked out of a converted car park in Southeast London. It's still very close to my heart. If you go to the lifts in the Peckham Level, you might find a sticker by the lift with the original HX logo there
You've
for the
marked
record.
it with
Well,
permission, obviously.
yeah, definitely not with permission, but it's that sticker's the least of their worries. So, um, uh, but so yeah, so look, a couple of things happened, right? Like we set the company up very early, and I think it's very easy, I think, to look at HX today. Andreessen Horowitz, Battery Ventures, founded of a $20 billion New York Stock Exchange listed company on our board, right? Beautiful office, gym, bar, all of those things. Like very easy to look at HX today and go, this is a good place to work, right? Whereas at the start of HX, lots of people would look at us and go, like, insurance, actuarial pricing software, right? Like, what's the point of this? Like, you really think this is going to be meaningful? And like, for the record, our mission has always been to help a $7 trillion make better decisions. So like, people like, I clearly didn't do a good enough job, or didn't focus enough of my efforts on helping rationalize that, that kind of disconnect. But the point I'm trying to make is, at the beginning, it was not obvious that HX was a good idea, right? Like, lots of good businesses that, like, they start off being very unobvious. And so, like, we didn't have a lot of money, right? We didn't have a brand. We had no time, right? And so the last thing that you do is have a fancy office, right? So we literally worked out of a converted car park in Southeast London. There's two of my founding engineers are here. We put the office together ourselves, right? On Saturday, we bought a ton of IKEA furniture. Like if you see a picture of it, it was literally, the floor was sloped like this. So like, there was only one way you could put the chairs, because otherwise you would start rolling out of the room, right? And so for me,
That'll keep you productive for sure.
certainly,
Be
yeah,
working hard.
exactly. There's lots of absurd stories I could tell you, like lack of curtains. We would super glue or Velcro the the boxes that we used to actually make the desks. We just kept, and we would stick them on the windows when the sun came out, right? Like absurdities, things. But I think the point I'm trying to make is, the people who joined the company very early on, like, for whatever reason, you could have to ask them. They were crazy enough to like believe in the mission and vision and the talent of the people around them. And like, nothing else really mattered. And I think, there's this famous phrase in Silicon Valley now, which is, Silicon Valley is no longer a place, it's a mindset. And I think when HX was very early on, it just did not make sense to work for HX, right? Like, these people, like there's two of them here, they could work for absolutely anyone they wanted, right? Like the top hedge funds, like, Palantir, they could go and work anywhere, but they chose to work at HX, right? And I think one of the things that I think a lot about now is, which one people in our team would choose to HX if we stripped away all the accoutrements, all the mod cons, right? And just to be clear, like, I don't expect everyone to, right?
Yeah.
Like, in the same way that I'm very glad to not have to put my jacket on to go to the toilet anymore, right? I don't expect that, but I think it's very important to me, and it comes back to that point you asked me at the beginning about like leading indicators. Like, absolutely, it is the most predictive thing I've seen of success across, we've probably hired 350, 400 people, right? Accounting for growth and people leaving and life changes and all of those things. Intrinsic motivation is by far the biggest long-term predictor of success.
So lots to unpack, right? We'll go back to the Peckham Carpark, which, by the way, I used to live in London. Big fan of the cinema in Peckham.
The Peckham
The
Plex.
cheapest cinema
Absolutely.
in all of London.
Yeah.
Worth going to. Thankfully, I wasn't too far away. So we've got the car park, the slopey floors, the jacket to the toilet. I'm not going to ask a follow-up about that. It's not important. But what is important to me, Amrit, is, as you describe kind of the early sort of origins of HX, what's the kind of cultural tenet that you have taken from that experience, the humility of that experience almost, that you want to make sure continues to stay true as we're sitting here in a perhaps a nicer, more fancy office?
Yeah, it's a good question. Look, I think, very, very few things in life are a sustainable differentiated advantage. And actually caring very deeply about what you spend your time on, right, is a massively sustainable differentiated advantage. Right? And it's why I spend a lot of time trying to understand the people inside the company who do, and not who tell me they care. That's meaningless, right? So if you show me they care through their actions. And so, because of our business is such a long cycle business, one of our board members, Marcus, who's the founder of a $20 billion company, talks about tunneling through granite, right? So often what we do feels like is the only really sustainable motivation is a deep sense of care that comes intrinsically. And at the beginning, our business by default, because it didn't have much else, filtered for people who had that, right? Just filtered for people with those sorts of values. Now we have to work much harder to find those people, right? It's much harder. And also, I can't have the expectation that that I have 100% of 250 people with that mindset. I can't do that, right? Whereas when we had 6 people, I could legitimately set a bar sufficiently high where 100% of 6 people, right, could have that mindset. So part of this ties into that, right? And I'm not saying there's a perfect overlap between that and this, right? Like the dimensions of top talent are more complicated than just that one fact aspect.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking about, and we'll ask them after this recording. what do you think was the main reason that some of your early top talent joined the organization? What was attractive to them? Because it sure as heck doesn't sound like the office was that attractive. So what was pulling them in that perhaps connects to this intrinsic motivation that you've referred to?
Yeah, so, unbiased self-reflection is a fundamentally flawed thing. So I'd say much better to ask them than me. I'll say two things. Very clearly, the talent bar, flukily, we set an extraordinarily high talent bar now, right? Back then. So I think, much less me or vision. I think probably just the challenge of the problem,
Mhm.
right? And then the people around them that they spend time. Like HX, like we have an all hands at HX. It's called show and tell because HX care about showing. We used to do our show all hands every week. It would start at 6:30 on Friday evening, right? That was like that was how it worked. Everyone was in the office, and then on Saturday morning, all the execs would come in, and we would do our half day leadership meeting, right? So like you were spending a lot of time in the same room with the people, and I think the problems were really hard. Like it was like we hired a group of people who were very excited at the prospect of the problem not obviously being solvable, right? Like it was that hard, like it had never
Wow.
been done before. Like, our investors, like some of our American investors come to me 2 years ago and they say, we spend a lot of time talking to startups. We don't know anyone in England taking on a technical challenge as hard as what you guys are doing, right? Maybe a little bit different with some of the AI research now. Um, so hard problems that people who
Mm,
genuinely want to go and test themselves,
yeah.
like the global stage of difficulty, and then just great people that you want going to have fun with the mindset around you, right?
It's really attractive, isn't it, to really ambitious people? And I don't mean ambition in the surface level sense. I mean
Mm,
folks that want to solve the unsolvable. And I love that. And I'm seeing nods from the front. So perhaps that you're onto something there, Amrit.
maybe.
Tell me one more, or answer this one last question around this first point, then we'll move on to our
Sure thing.
second, which is in the growth from Peckham to this beautiful office we're in now. Obviously, you're adding more benefits, right? Rewards, perks. You're creating conditions for people to feel like they can do their best work. It's obvious to
Mm,
me in the time we've spent working with the HX. How do you navigate a sense of entitlement that
mm,
organically comes up? It's a bit like what you said earlier. It's like, oh, I'll never let that happen. But from my own experience, I grew up professionally in Google, and that you join, and people always tell you and say, be careful you don't take it for granted. And then you find yourself in the free food line complaining that there's no more lobster left. And in that moment, you slap yourself in the face and you catch yourself on, right? And it happens. So how do you go about that as a leader?
yeah, I think, look, it's very hard. Uh, I think there's a wonderful book. It's called Build by a guy called Tony Fadell. He was one of the early creators of the iPad. You probably iPod. You probably know. You're nodding, so you know. Like he makes a difference, a distinction between a benefit and a perk,
Mm,
right? And I care a lot about this, right? I think I've always seen that the benefits we provide our team as being fundamental to them doing their best work, right? And I think so. For example, the famous like the ping pong table is the famous example, right? Like it's become such a cliche. It's a perk. It's not a benefit,
mm,
right? And so investing in people's mental well-being, their health, their family, right? These are just like sensible things to do.
yeah,
And they allow people to perform their best at work. And the contract that I expect, like not the social contract between like HX and the team, is that we're here to do our best work. And to the extent that money is an important factor of that, there are other things that are non-financial that also help us do best work. So, you know, there will never be any free lobster here. Sorry. Like I'm going to tell you that now. Like we're not going to do that. And I take the bus, right, wherever I can. Like, I pay for my own flights if I'm going to fly business class. Like, I hope people will see me model the right behaviors myself. Um, but to the extent that we can help people be better at their jobs and there are good
yeah.
non-financial things that we can invest, it's actually quite easy, right,
But
to
as
do
you've
that.
grown, have you had an experience where you've overheard someone or
Oh
someone's
yeah,
come to you and
lots.
said they've complained about the lack of ping pong table?
Oh yeah, and you can
Or
imagine
actually
I
there's
took
no
it
more.
very well, I'm sure. No, no, yeah, no, look, no, we do. And again, you're not going to get it perfectly right, right? And I think a message gets attenuated very significantly as a company gets bigger, right? The early team, every single one of them reported directly into me, so they better or worse, right? They got the Amrit fire hose, and that's not how it works now. There's 7 layers of indirection between me, and our most, early stage team members. So No, it does happen. And so in my mind, it's just like being very explicit and unapologetic about what motivates us, what actually keeps, what the kind of elements of our culture that are fundamental to the incentive structures that we
Yeah.
that we set up.
What a journey. And point number one, right, from the Peckham Carpark, I feel like we should set up weekly tours for HXers that are new as part of their onboarding to go see the sticker in the elevator. But for now, Amrit, let's move into your second point, which is also quite curious to me. I'm interested to see where you take it, which is the minority mindset. Tell us a bit about what you mean by that.
So, if you work at HX, the reality of the situation is because of some of the characteristics that I've just talked about, you are not going to have the same, if you thrive here, you're not going to have the same attitude to your work that the vast majority of people, particularly in the tech world, do. Because the vast majority of technology uh, um, companies do not do not sell to institutions or provide software where the cycles are so very, very long, right? And as a result, if you have the mindset that, that makes you successful here, it's going to be differentiated. Right. And I think one of the really important things is to rationalize that because, you know, again, it can be very uncomfortable to work in a place like this when actually you can look at lots of other places and ostensibly the work looks easier, right? Looks easier, looks higher dopamine, right? There's lots of other things that make it look cooler, right? And so it's just like having a level of comfort, right, with that is something that actually it takes time to cultivate. When HX started, I found myself doing this myself, and one's own actions often instrument your feelings about things. I would never introduce HX as like an insurtech. I was like almost slightly ashamed to do that, right?
Because it might put people
Well,
off or
yeah, and I would say things like we sell to the financial sector, risk, and all of those things. And all of those things are truisms, right? They absolutely are. But now I'm just like, I go to the Andreessen Horowitz CEOs conference. I'm the only bloody insurtech founder there, right? Like it's just me, and there's lots of banking and derivatives and lots of other people. And now I'm very proud of that, right? I make a joke about it. I'm the only insurtech founder at this conference, right? And I think learning to embrace the things that are different, and feeling really comfortable with that, and like make them into a weapon, like make those into a weapon for you, like particularly if you have this ability to like focus on your inputs and through the very, very like hard times do the things that matter. You just got such an advantage,
mm,
right? But you should be very like I'm very clear, like this makes you very unusual, and the vast majority of your friends in different startups will not be operating this way,
mhm.
right? They will look at a graph on the wall that is like very steadily doing this, and that will be their motivation. Whereas HX goes like this, right? Like there's lots and lots of flat periods in the company, right? And
Mm,
it's in our nature to very quickly discount the big jumps, right?
yeah.
So yeah, you have to have a different mindset by design.
And let's take that even further because yeah, you're quite unique in the context of the startup world, as you've described a couple of times now around the long cycles. And then you've got this also kind of smaller subset of folks in front of us here, right? And other people listening will have heard of top talent programs that
Mm,
they are done probably not as often as they should be, and certainly not at your size and scale. I mean, I
mm.
think that's absolutely our experience as well, right? So you're investing in them. So they're also a smaller subset. Like, what about their mindset and as top talent representatives of HX, how does that look to both their colleagues internally and externally? What's the kind of weight that they're maybe carrying with that?
Yeah. So I think I say this. I still do the culture onboarding for every HXer myself, right? It's very important to me that I do that, and I think one of the most important things that I can convey to the team is like there's often a misconception that the bar is arbitrarily set by leadership in a company, which is completely false, right? The bar is set by the best people in the company. That's just how it works, right? Like the equilibrium state of the company's performance is determined by the best people in the company. And so the reason I say that is for me, part of this and this program and identifying top talent through like I have other systems for doing this, like we have founders honor awards and there's overlap people in this room who've on both, is actually for other people in the company to be able to look at their peers and identify what those people stand for, right? And so I think, it's always very important to me that, people don't come to me going, what does it mean to be successful? Of course, I can tell them what I think, and I'm reasonably influential, right, in that. But it's much more important to me that they can look around them and see that. So for me, the signaling power of that, and also their ability to talk to those people around them.
Yeah, it's super interesting. I mean, I think that for me is certainly one of the benefits in this program and others, that it's kind of the rising tide metaphor as well, right? And this is such a cross section of your organization,
Yeah.
and especially for HX with your long cycles, because the relationships then across functions, across teams is so important.
And across time, right? It's just really important, right? These things just take time. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
This is actually a perfect jumping off point to our third point, Amrit, which is all about the capacity paradox. And I know within this, we're really looking at it through the lens of, how does one maintain high performance without burnout?
Yeah. So I think burnout is a fascinating word. It's overused today, I think, very much. And that's not denying its presence. I think the word is overused. So I'll say two things. I think that burnout is, I have never seen someone burnt out by working too hard, right? Like I've never actually seen that. And, I've run this company for nearly 8 years. I've worked with lots of people. Burnout comes from doing things that you don't enjoy for a very long time with no end in sight, right? Like that is actually the principle. Those are the principal drivers of people being burned out. Like this team knows what it's like. There's a few people in the room to know what it's like to work extremely hard, right? Like the last few weeks of our launch period, the team worked, between 80 and 100 hours a week for 6 weeks, right? And like, I don't know if
Is that all?
yeah, indeed, right? And I think, it's worth doing the sums of what that looks like, right? Broadly, that is just get up, work, go to bed for 7 days a week, right? For 6 weeks in a row. And, everyone was tired, physically broken at the end of that. But burnout in terms of mental capacity, no. So I'll say two things. I think one of the great skills to have a very high capacity, like there's two skills, right? One is to be able to grind when things are hard. It's a good life skill, right? I have two young kids. It's very important for me that they can see me doing that. And they go, did you have a good day? I say, no. They say, why are you going to keep going? Because it's important to me to keep going, right? But the other one is to find things that look like work to other people, but that are not, right? And if you can do that, you have just a massive advantage, right? Another differentiated minority advantage over others. So, I think one of the things that I look for in our best people is the things that they go and just do because they're motivated to do them without being told, right? We have this phrase unexpected value, which is not quite the same, but just like finding things that aren't work. So I think, very high performance doesn't come, we used to write this on our website. I don't know if we still do. It's like, it doesn't come from doing 80 hours of sprint points, right? It might come from 80 hours of work a week, but it usually comes from 50 to 60 hours of work and another 20 hours of things that, you would do while you're sitting on the couch while other people are watching a sitcom. Right?
Tell me more about this finding. Did you say finding work that doesn't look like work?
That's right.
Okay,
Exactly.
give me an example of that.
Yeah, so, I'm a good example of this, I think, myself, because I'm very lucky that I enjoy, like, hacking on things, right? So, like, I've built some side projects in the company. And look, I work a 70-hour baseline, right? So, like, I can find 5 to 10 hours. Most people can, right? On building other projects, using the latest vibe coding software, or I was building some pipelines using 810, which is this amazing automation, low-code automation platform. So, like, finding things that that people who enjoy tinkering and experimentation, and you don't need to do that with software. You can do that with reading, or you can do that with, lots of other things. There are loads of things I can think a little bit about.
So kind of other things outside your core role that are helping advance maybe some of the
That's
things
right.
that you're committed to.
Exactly right. Exactly
Yeah.
right. And there are loads of things that fall into that category, right?
Yeah.
My frame of reference is very much aligned with my nerdiness, right? So I would give technical examples.
Thank you for holding back on that
No
for me.
problem. You're very
You're
welcome.
very
Yeah,
gracious.
no, it's so when you meet people like that, they've just got such a huge advantage because those extra, whatever it is, 10 to 30 hours a week compounds so gigantically over such a long time, right?
Yeah.
My kind of partner in crime outside my co-founder, Richard, is just a good example of this sort of thing, right? Like the things that interest him and motivate him allow him to do what to other people looks like a grind, but to him it's not.
Yeah, no,
Right?
look, I mean, it resonates. That concept resonates with me. And if you, I mean, coincidentally, after this, I'm going to play basketball in Cornwall this weekend, and that was my side hustle. Not necessarily advancing people playbook, but certainly I've found time to organize and orchestrate this event. I'm going. We've arranged the whole tournament, playing lots of games. It'll be great fun. And so I subscribe to that. I'm curious though about the 80 to 100 hour weeks. I have to get into that, because how long can one do that for? And do you still see a role in paying the deficit at some point, and kind of
Yeah.
regaining or recharging?
Yeah. So I think so there's 2 points to this. So I'll answer that. So I think by definition, if something is operating at a line like this, like very high, it's not high performance, because if you can sustain it over a long term, it's a marathon run, it's not a sprint,
Hmm.
right? So I think
Hmm.
it's important to recognize that performance does come in peaks and troughs. I think most people use that though as an excuse. I don't think when people say that, my first answer is, well, tell me what your peak looks like, right? And I think so that's an important thing, right? The difference between a peak and a trough is much more an indicator of someone's ability to really get out in front than their average state. But the other thing I would say, and I think this is probably the unfashionable thing to say the truth is, and like, to deny the genetic variation of people's ability to work, right, has become very fashionable. It's become very fashionable to say that actually what we should expect of society is the Victorian era factory-based 9 to 5, right? And different humans have a different capacity. I always found this incredibly unfair, for the record, because I worked in companies where that was the expectation, and my baseline capacity that I find quite comfortable is 65 or 70 hours, right? I find that that doesn't drain me, right?
Whereas others, it might it
And
might be
others might.
it might be
Yeah. That's
unsustainable.
right. And but
Okay.
in the same way that, like, you don't have strength training competitions where you limit how strong someone can be before they go in, right?
Mm.
Like, you shouldn't have a situation where you punish people for having that. So my point with capacity is, like, I've always worked very hard in my system to understand those people who have the very rare gift, right? A high work capacity, a high passion for their work, very low entitlement, right? And smarts and intellect come very low on that list, for the record, right?
Mm.
Some of our best people don't have degrees, or they've come from, like, ostensibly relatively low predictive of success outcome environments, right?
Mhm.
But the things that I can see are actually differentiated in that way. So in my mind, it's like, it doesn't bother me at all, right? If our average at the 250 people, our average is, not 40 but 50, whatever it is, hours a week. That doesn't bother me. But I will always reward the people. I never wanted to create a company where it was unfashionable, or we
Mm.
tried to set up some sort of kind of antibody mechanism to eliminate those people who really do have all those gifts.
How about the folks, Amrit, that are able to do in 30 hours what another person might do in 50?
Yeah, I love that. That's the easiest example of that. No one who's ever said to me they can do that has been able to, ever. Right? There's this famous trope, which I think is really damaging. It's a guy called Naval, who I'm saying this on a public podcast, and Naval doesn't know who I am, so it's fine. He used to talk a lot about this magic product manager that played computer games for 8 hours a week and then did all this perfect work in an hour and a half. If any of you know any of those people, yeah, just send them my way. Yeah. Like, I can tell you right now that I have seen this number of people who actually do have that magic
For
power.
our listeners, that's 0.
Yeah, that's a 0. Sorry, yes.
I think I could probably extrapolate or guess you're thinking, or at least share mine and see if it resonates with
Mm,
you. And then we best wrap this up. Although
mhm.
I'm desperate to actually come back and just sit and talk about capacity paradox all day, because I find it interesting, and possible different point of views and possible alignment. I think for me, when I have those individuals in my team,
Mm,
or I see them in other teams where they are getting through their work, right, their core work, what I want to see is what they do next, which I think you've already talked about, right? So if
yeah.
they're getting it done in 30, where's the other 10, 20 that they can spend on that's really going to advance our mission?
Oh, totally. And I think, you've put that really well. Like, I think I also don't want to deny that people can get through work much more quickly, right? That, of course, that is the case. But, I subscribe very much to like, the inputs based focus on what you do with your time mindset, because actually what I'm looking for in my best people is their ability to drive the outcomes that I didn't expect. So actually it suits me great for a large cohort of our employees to be set some targets, and then they get them done. Like, we pay them for time as much as work, right? Like, so what they do within their core hours, that's fine. But actually I don't want to set the incentive structures up to reward efficiency, right?
Mm,
I want to reward output.
mm.
Right. And so, like, in my mind, it's like, actually those people with high efficiency and high capacity multiplied together generate high output. Sorry for the mathematical equation again.
No,
Uh,
I actually think I'm surprised I followed, but I did. And the bit that I liked, how you described it there, was yes, it's not about efficiency and just sort of rewarding people who are doing what's expected. It's
Mm.
about doing the things that you didn't expect. I actually, I'm taking that back with me after the weekend next week to my team, because I think it's a really nice way of thinking about how to, bring more value. And I know for our top talent in the room, that's particularly relevant for them. And that's probably the expectation and kind of the formula, the other side of the equation for the contribution of this program for them and their careers and so on. Amrit, we could talk all day. I want to wrap it up with our final question, which I ask all our guests after their 3 points. And as a reminder, we talked about your 3 points on culture and talent, talked about the Peckham Carpark test. I'm going to go and try and find the sticker. We talked about the minority mindset. And then we finished off on a topic that I wish we had more time to go into around the capacity paradox. The final question is, if we were all to adopt some of the lessons you've shared around culture and talent, how might the world change for the better?
It's a good question. I hope we'd all do a few more things that we thought we were, that we didn't think we were capable of. I think that what a wonderful thing, right? That was the big thing that I say to everyone here, right? Like, I think your definition of your best work is ironically not your own definition of your best work, right? And so, there are lots of people who've worked at HX, and, I've always wanted to be liked. If I'm to be liked, it's because I'm respected, not respected because I'm liked, right? That's always been very important to me, right? Like, I never wanted anyone to reward me for being nice to them. Like, what I wanted them to do is for them to feel really like that feel like I held my commitment to them, that they would do their best work, and it was actually I helped them raise their expectations of themselves.
Yeah.
So I hope if our culture does anything, and if anyone gets to say that they got even one or two of those things in their career, then we've done our job, I think.
I love that. And I love once again how you have made it not about the individual, but how they cooperate, collaborate, work within a group, right? Because it's easy for me to define my best work, but that's almost vacuous. It doesn't really exist. It's about others. So, Amrit, this has been such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
joining the
Thanks
3
for having
Points
me.
podcast. Thank
you.
you.
Good.